Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how you doing today?
Good, good. I'm looking forward to my daily hike today, even though it's
hmm
whatever minus 500. But I like to get out there. I have a group of high school friends, and we go for a socially distanced walk once a week,
Oh, yeah.
and it's good to get out there, and it's good to see other people in the great out of doors. I was so relieved during the last lockdown when they said that this kind of thing was allowable. I
hmm
was really worried because I'm one of those people who need a little bit of at least once a week to see some other people. So
Yeah, some social interactions, nice once in a while, eh? I'm
yeah,
trying to remember. I mean, I saw the clerk at Safeway the other day through the glass for about 2.5 minutes, and I think that's about it for my social interaction in the last week. Other
yes,
than immediate family, of course, but three other people living here and a variety of cats and dogs.
yeah. And just for all the people who are worried whether it's on the up and up, I mean, Hinshaw said specifically you're allowed to go for walks with people as long as you socially distance, and we make sure that we always do that and that we're safe doing it. So there you
Right on.
go. Bruce, let's talk Oilers.
Hmm.
We're going to have a little bit of a season review here, just first impressions on the Oilers season, take a look at a few things, and but before we get into that, let's talk about the Oilers' latest move, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't really understand it. The Oilers have waived Troy Grosnick, and it feels like Groundhog Day in this circumstance because they waived Anton Forsberg and they lost him on waivers to the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yep.
I think there's a decent chance that they'll lose Troy Grosnick.
Very good
What
chance.
this means is that Mike Smith is coming back, and they'll have Smith and Koskinen, who are, those are two NHL goalies. I'm not complaining about that right now, but what if Smith gets hurt again? What if Koskinen gets hurt again? And where the Oilers found themselves last time was they had to play Stuart Skinner, who won them the game. I think it was 8-5, but they were playing against a weak Ottawa team, and Skinner was iffy in that. He let in a few iffy goals, if we're completely honest. Good for him for winning his first game and doing that. But here's the truth. Like, he was a marginal AHL goalie last year. He's not ready for the NHL. I don't think Ken Holland would argue that he's ready. I
Mhm.
hope he wouldn't. If you believe in overripe players making the NHL, like, geez, Stuart Skinner is not close to that. So essentially, if you lose Grosnick on waivers, he's your next bet if someone gets hurt. And I just don't. I just think there was other options. They could have waived James Neal. They could have waived Kyle Turris. They could have waived Chason, who's already been waived. Could have gone to the and all you do then is on your active roster, you just have exactly how many forwards as you need for that game that night, and you keep Troy Grosnick there on your active NHL 23-man roster uh, for the rest of the year, essentially. And it's the only way to be safe, I think, right now with the goalie situation. And I don't know, Bruce. So what's your take? I didn't like it.
Yeah, well, musical goalies. Here we go again. I mean, think of the poor bugger that made the trip from Los Angeles to Edmonton by car, had to wait in some motel at the Montana Alberta border uh, while the Oilers tried to put in a claim on some other goalie that they didn't get. Um, while Aaron Dell, that was they. Uh, then he comes in and he does the good soldier thing. They activate him when they have to activate him. He sits on the bench as a backup. Then they put him as a third goalie and bring in Stuart Skinner to actually play a game. And then Grosnick comes in, he backs up again. And then now here he is on waivers, and it's like 3 weeks of his life gone, and all he's been doing is quarantining, driving, sitting in a hotel in whatever Entry Point, Montana, and Now there's, I would say, much greater than 50% likelihood that he will be reclaimed by the Los Angeles Kings, the team that waived him in the first place, but obviously wanted him for their taxi squad. They have some 21-year-old kid currently filling in on their taxi squad, and they're going to see that guy and they're going to say, well, we know him, and he's the guy that we brought in to do this job, and it's just going to be the same old goalie carousel that we've been seeing all year with these goalies going hither and yon for you know for the pleasure of international travel and sitting in hotel rooms for weeks on end. And I feel for those backup goalies. I really do. Not even backups, the number threes. There's been a lot of pillar to post going on. One of the guys that got claimed, I actually saw Eric Comrie play a game last weekend, so it is possible that they actually come out of it and get an NHL shot. But and that only happened because New Jersey's number one goalie was on for COVID restrictions, so they had back to back. So they used their number two and three, and Eric Comrie was one of them. So it can work out, but for the most part, it's a lot of uh, bugging around for not a lot of payoff and for not a lot of coverage. You have these teams, and we've seen it firsthand with the Oilers, the lack of coverage of at the goalie position. And the whole point of the league having this mandated, you must have a third goalie available on your taxi squad, um, was to cover off for situations, and yet the NHL did not cover their own backsides and come up with some kind of way to allow teams to keep their number three without all this, old style waiver rules with new style taxi squad, and that just nobody thought it through, obviously.
So we're getting a little pushback. I am online, Bruce, because I've already posted on this. And so
Mm-hmm.
Kerry Kettle, who's a really
Mm-hmm.
smart guy, says, at this point, given the need to quarantine, I'm guessing unlikely any U.S. team picks him up.
I'm betting
So
on the Kings, but let's see.
yeah, I'm not sure when you go to the States, what the quarantine rule is there. Didn't wasn't he able to get into their game fairly quickly?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
less than it is here for sure.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about that. And then original Posar, Calgary lawyer, very smart
Mm-hmm.
guy again. He says he'll probably clear. If they kept three goalies on active roster, they couldn't keep Bouchard on roster and have 12 forwards without waiving a D-man like Lagesson or Cuckoo.
Mm-hmm.
It was either Grosnick, not play Bouch, or waive Lagesson, Jones, Cuckoo. Only 11 forwards, not sustainable. So this is where I think you just they have to make a decision, I guess, Bruce. They have to make it. Is it more important to have that third goalie or to keep? I just think if you go with the exact number of forwards you're going to have, 11
Mm-hmm.
forwards, 12 forwards, and every other forward's waived. So that means Turris, Neal, and Chason, Nygaard, lots of guys, and none of them are going to get picked up, I don't think. Now, it's true. If you're going to have Bouchard on the roster, plus not waive Lagesson or Cuckoo, and also you want 12 forwards, you have a problem.
Yep.
So at this point, Bruce, I would waive you have to make a decision on Slater Cuckoo or William Lagesson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that decision is upon you actually yet. I think you could have just put James Neal or Turris or Chase on whoever isn't playing, go with
Mm-hmm.
11 forwards again and put one of those guys on waivers. That's the move they could have made in the short term here. And in the long term, I think you have to make a decision. And I think it's more important to have that third goalie than it probably is to have one of Lagesson or Cuckoo. And you have to make up your mind on who you want at this point. And personally, I would keep, not sure, a choice. I don't think that's the decision you had to make right
Mm-hmm.
now.
No, I agree.
The decision you make next week or 2 weeks from
Mm-hmm.
now, or send Bouchard back down to the taxi squad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe he has a couple rough games. So what do you think?
Well, I think they've got three extra players, right, up beyond the 20 that they can dress.
Yeah.
And so far, what Holland has done, and I actually think he's done a pretty crafty job with the forwards, that he's pared it right down to Uh, Only 12 active forwards, and he has freedom to move a whole bunch of guys to the taxi squad because they've all cleared waivers already, and they're well within still the 30 days. Well, that's coming. Uh, that he can have 12 active forwards, and at the moment, all three of the extra players are defensemen. And with Mike Smith coming back onto the active roster, the choice was to keep Grosnick and either place Bouchard and the taxi squad, or to go with seven defensemen again in Calgary and run with 11 forwards and only have 11 forwards on the active roster and
Yeah, that's what I would do.
put Chase on back on the taxi squad, and then you'd have a situation where you'd have six forwards on the taxi squad, all of whom have cleared waivers. I mean, that's how you get to the taxi squad, of course, but I mean, six guys who've played in the NHL this year on the taxi squad at forward, and go with 11-7-2 like they did last game. But I don't know how long a term that is. But I'm with you in that. I'm surprised that they've done that now. Like they could have waited a couple days and just gone with the shuffle. Well, tonight we're going to use Bouchard, so we're going to just stick with 11 forwards. Or tonight we're not going to use Bouchard, so we're just going to put him on the taxi squad for one game. It does limit their choices. I mean, it doesn't. They can't go with six defensemen with Bouchard being one of them. I mean, that's one choice they don't have. But so they've only got 11 forwards that are on the roster that would have to clear waivers. In fact, 10, because technically Kylo Yamamoto doesn't have to clear waivers, but they're not sending him out anytime soon. But they've got a situation where I guess they think Mike Smith is healthy enough to play, and either they're not impressed with Grosnick, or they think there'll be another goalie in the pipeline, or they like what they saw of Stuart Skinner, or who the hell knows. I mean, it's a risk, but.
All right. Let's go to the team now, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
And it's complicated to talk about this because there's so many moving pieces and moving parts.
It is.
Essentially it comes down to, do you want that extra depth on defense, or do you want to cover yourself in net? Mm-hmm. And my point is, when you play the goalie, he's not your third string goalie when he's in net. It's not like when you play Lagesson or Cuckoo, they're your third string defenseman, and you can hide them. You can play them 8 minutes a game. Your goalie, second he's on the ice, he's your first line Conor McDavid, top line, top pairing D-man goalie. He's the most important player on the ice. And I never want to have the situation again where that's Stuart Skinner. I think that's a mistake when you're putting yourself in that position. And so for that reason, I would do everything I can at this point to have that. Your third string goalie, it's got to be on your active roster and protected. And that should be the priority in my view. So simplify it. So Bruce, the Oilers this year, we do grade A scoring chance project. And here's the good news. In the wide open Canadian division where there's lots of offense, the Oilers are creating more chances, grade A chances, than they did last year. Last year, they created 11.2 grade A chances per game. This year, they're creating 13.1 grade A chances per game. That's a lot of grade A chances. That should translate to about 4 goals a game. I don't know if they're averaging that. They're not, are they? They're not that high.
No, they're 3.5, close to 3.5, for and against.
Okay, so they're giving up more chances though as well. Last year they gave up 10.5 grade A chances per game. This year they're giving up 10.9 grade A chances per game. But they're on average they're out chancing teams, and I think that their record is 6-6. They could easily be 7-5, I think, if they'd got a little bit better goaltending or puck luck in a few games. But at least they're 6-6. So not bad, Bruce. I don't think this is a team that is worse than its record. It's probably a team that's a little bit better and is trending up. So we'll see what happens. I'm cautiously I'm optimistic about the team. What about you?
Yeah, certainly this last week has these last few days have turned favors in their situation in the right direction. I'm currently viewing the diving glove save that Mikko Koskinen made off of Mitch Marner in the third period, Saturday's game against Toronto, as the turning point of the season, at least of the Oilers' fortunes in the short term, where Marner scores there on the power play with the clock ticking down in the third, and Toronto wins in regulation. The Oilers are really in the soup at 3-7 at that point, and instead they hung on and got the extra point, and then they got the second point in overtime in that particular game. That's the only overtime game they've played all year. And then, of course, the two wins against Ottawa, which were taking care of business. But I liked what happened in those games in terms of Willie Lagesson got a couple of games. Evan Bouchard got a game, looked really good. They were able to give Mikko Koskinen a rest and get Stuart Skinner, something to build on. For Stuart Skinner, when you say you never want to see him again, well, I don't want to see him again this season, probably. Some future point,
well,
maybe he's their goalie, right? Yeah. And so getting that one game under his belt is, that's important for that player. And so those games were valuable to the Oilers, even though neither of the Ottawa wins was a masterpiece of a hockey game. But they got the 4 points, and they got those, they got the rest for the goalie and all those chances for other players on the roster. So I'm a lot more sort of buoyant about the team's situation today than I was a little while ago. You might recall how depressed I was after the loss against Toronto in game number 9. Geez, what's going on here? But
yeah, Bruce, I've always been a little bit more buoyant, even during that downtime, because I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that they have been getting the chances. They've been consistent. Like against the Leafs, they outchanced the Leafs in almost every game. I think every game. Mm-hmm. And Toronto's got the best record. The Oilers are as good a team as the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. I'm convinced. And they're very similar teams. They match up well. So we'll see what happens. The Oilers don't match up well against the Montreal Canadiens. They match up well against every other team that we've seen. At least okay. Winnipeg's a good team. We'll see with Calgary. So this is the last unknown. But I think the Oilers are looking okay. And thanks for the clarification on Skinner. Of course I want to see him in the Oilers
I understand.
Come in years to come. But I don't want to see him again this year. He's not ripe. He's not close to ripe, to use that.
He should be number 4
expression. He should be number 4, and that could easily have been a pretty bad experience. And I'm not blaming it on Skinner. I'm blaming it on Ken Holland, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we're wrong, and other people are right that he will clear and waivers, and then the Oilers will be out of this situation for at least a month. So Bruce, let's go position. Let's just talk special teams for a second. So, and I'm just going to give the rough generalities. Last year, the Oilers had the second best penalty kill. This year, they're the 25th best. They've dropped considerably. Last year, they had the best power play. Now they're 8th, but their clearance percentage, like their success rate, is very similar. They were 29.5% on the power play in terms of scoring last year, and this year they're 27.3%. They're getting more grade A chances on the power play this year. So I think their power plays come around. They're about where they were at last year. And if they can maintain that, and I think that they probably can, given the talent on the power play. I'm not worried about the power play, but the penalty kill, Bruce, man, they have missed. I made this point last podcast. They have missed Riley Sheahan a lot on the PK. So they tried to replace Riley Sheahan with Kyle Turris, thinking that Sheahan was part of them leaking goals against at even strength last year. And I think that's a fair comment. Riley Sheahan was a mediocre, if that, player at even strength last year, nothing to write home about. But unfortunately, the experiment so far isn't working out. Kyle Turris has been a significantly weaker player, both at even strength, which is saying a lot, and on the penalty kill than Riley Sheahan was. Riley Sheahan was just a better hockey player and far more solid defensively. Kyle Turris, again, repeatedly having problems in the defensive slot, to the extent where he was been all but moved off the penalty kill. and Gaetan Haas took his spot as third line center last game, and we'll see what happens going forward. So, people make the point it's early. Brian Burke was saying it's early to judge on Oilers now. He was saying it's early to judge these players and say the sky's falling in. And so that's a fair comment. Maybe Kyle Turris will turn it on. But at this point, it's fair to say that hasn't come close to happening, Bruce. And if I'm completely honest, I don't see him becoming a third line center. I see him maybe being able to help out on the fourth line. What's your thought?
Yeah, well, so it's certainly been an unremarkable start for Kyle Turris, at least in any kind of positive way. He's got 3 points in 12 games. He doesn't yet have a single plus game on the season. His ice time, let's give the minutes from his ice time: 13, 14, 16, 16, 14, 13, 13, 14, 14, 9, 13, 8. And clearly he's running out of rope with head coach Dave Tippett, that twice in the last 3 games he's played fewer than 10 minutes. And last game, with only 11 forwards, he was assigned to the fourth line. And of course, with one other line mate sort of sporadic in and out of the lineup, he's basically been fired from the penalty kill, which Tippett had expressed hopes that, based on some experience, short experience at the World Championships years ago, that Tippett might be, or that Turris might be solid on the penalty kill. Well, we haven't seen that. And in fact, we haven't really seen much solidity from him in the defensive zone, period. Like, he's not a strong defensive player, to my view. It's just too many 10-bell chances happening from the slot on his watch.
So yeah, if we expand this out to the center, the entire center position, I think the Oilers are getting. I think Conor McDavid is playing some of his best hockey at even strength that we've ever seen. He is driving the attack on even strength consistently, and his defense has been, I'd say, improved from last year. There's been a few mistakes, a few slip-ups, but overall, I think this is the best two-way game we've ever seen Conor McDavid play. And Leon Draisaitl is he's I'm not in love with his defensive play yet, even though they haven't been scored on much when he's on the ice, and he's not at fault on a lot of goals against. But there has been a number of major slip-ups where the other team hasn't capitalized. But I think overall, his offensive play has been strong at even strength. Mm-hmm. And I'm just comparing him actually to Connor McDavid here, not to normal human beings. Right. So by NHL standards, he's a top line center, so the Oilers have these two really strong. I think that this experiment of having them both lead their own lines continues to work, and they are both getting their job done. And I expect Draisaitl's defensive performance, which is the only little bit of a minor quibble because he haven't been scored on, so you can't make too much out of it. I think that'll come around, and it's already coming around. But it's a funny thing. It's like from riches to rags in terms of the center position. The good news, Haas has stepped in, Bruce, and I think he's a solid fourth line or third line center. And I think Devon Shore might be the fourth line guy. Or they're just going to go with 11 forwards for a while, which I'm completely content with too. I don't have a problem with that. So Kara and Turris, to me, have played themselves out of the lineup, with Haas and Shore playing themselves into the lineup. That's what I would do. That's what I've seen to date. And I can see going back to Turris. I'd like to see Turris get through one game without giving up being the major culprit on a slot chance in the Oilers zone. If he can just take that step first as a player, that'll be progress, and then we'll see what happens after that with him.
Gaetan Haas sounds to me this is a very encouraging development. He's played those last 2 games. That was another thing good thing that happened in that Ottawa series. Now we have to temper that with saying both of his games have been against Ottawa, as opposed to being against the good teams that the Oilers played earlier in the season. But in 2 games, Haas played nearly 10 minutes on the penalty kill, and the Oilers allowed 0 goals. His shots against rate are like half of any other player on the Oilers penalty kill unit, just vastly superior to, Kyle Turris, who's given up uh, over 12 goals per 60 minutes that he's been on the ice in the penalty kill. You know, small numbers, of course. 24 minutes ice time is not doesn't tell you a huge amount, but by eye, he wasn't that good at it. And Haas is I love his skating, and I think particularly on the penalty kill, like clearing the zone, winning battles, getting in on the forecheck. And we've always liked his positional game on the defensive side. And last year we didn't see him much on the PK, and this year they're going to be forced to use him just by lack of alternatives. But since he's been in there, to me, he looks like a guy who's just going to stay in the regular lineup and play every game.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so, because
sure need help
he's
down there.
certainly earned it so far. So for him to succeed, he's got to, like he's got to score a little bit and not give up much in the defensive end. But that's what he did last year. He
Hmm.
was a better defensive player than Sheahan at even strength, and so yeah, I think the Oilers have three centers here, which is when two of them are McDavid and Draisaitl, and I don't think Haas is a bad third center. So the position is close to being covered, spectacularly covered, but they just got to get Haas has to be consistent, and they got to get one more guy going, and I think that could be Devon Shore, who I've liked his speed, I've liked his hustle. He's probably a winger more than he is a center, but if he can focus on playing center in the defensive zone, maybe he can get it done. All right, Bruce, wingers. What would you say about the Oilers' wingers? What do you like and what do you don't like so far?
Well, same old, same old. You know, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, a converted center, is their most polished all-around winger, and then it's cast as thousands. Although Kylo Yamamoto certainly has emerged as being a top four forward on this team with the three centers and himself. And Yamamoto, lots of encouraging developments there, including his own work. You know, he's being deployed on the penalty kill, and he plays such a strong defensive game that I think that's a good spot for him. He's fearless, man. He likes to get in the shooting lanes, which is a problem that we've seen with Oilers forwards in the past. And um, he's got things going on on the offense. Obviously, he and Draisaitl combine very, very well together, and that duo I think we can expect to see going forward for an indeterminate future. So that's good. Um, I've liked what I've seen out of Dominic Cahoon. It took him a long while to get going uh, on the
Scoreboard.
offensive end, scoring points. But I like his game. Like I see him as a very good complementary forward. He keeps showing up in good places, and he keeps showing up at good times in those places, and he doesn't give up a lot defensively. So I see him on in the sort of the Thomas Tatar style of forward that
That'd be
uh,
good.
is not not a dominant player, but a very good support player with a dominant player. And obviously, playing with Draisaitl, he's got that. And of course, he has the inside baseball knowledge of Draisaitl's game and what makes him tick. So I think that signing is very promising.
He's a little slower than I thought he might be. Like he's not fast. I thought he might be, but he's very clever. He's very
He is.
clever. He's sound. He's got Tobias Reeder's defensive play because he's as sound defensively as Reeder, but he's got a lot more pop on the attack because he's far more clever and good with the puck and combine well with other players. And he was always getting grade A scoring chance shots, even when he wasn't scoring early on. He was getting some chances, consistently getting maybe one a game, and then finally he scored some goals. So let's hope that continues. Bruce, I think that I really like what I've seen in the forwards. Um,
Hmm.
Yarby has been inconsistent, but
Right.
he's had enough really good games to give me hope that this experiment is working out, and he just needs to put together a run of good games in a row. So Yamamoto has been strong. Nugent Hopkins has been strong. Nugent Hopkins has not been getting the points at even strength yet. But he is getting the scoring chances. He is creating a lot with McDavid, so that will come. He should start to convert. He's missed the net a little bit more than I would like to see with some great chances. So yeah, Puljujarvi, I'm just looking at my notes here, scoring chance notes. Puljujarvi, Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto, Cahoon, and even Chase on Cassian and Neal have been, I think, okay at even strength. I'm not loving Cassian's game because he's often kind of inattentive with the puck in his own zone. But I then they have Nygaard and Archibald. They've got a lot of depth at forward on the wing, and they've got they've got Ennis in there as well. Ennis struggled early in the year. He's been the one guy I think who's struggled the most this year. But overall, they've got good depth, and they've got enough top six forwards, and they've got some grinders and checkers. So I don't have any. They finally have got together at least an okay group of wingers with some fairly high top end talent with Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto, and then maybe Cahoon and Puljujarvi. So overall, good position.
Yeah, Yarby, I neglected to mention him earlier, but his quick emergence into the top six is, I'm not sure if it's emergence or emergency, that Cassian wasn't clicking at all really early on in the season, and not sure if it was more Cassian getting demoted or Yarby getting promoted, but there certainly are signs of him clicking with McDavid and Nugent Hopkins in recent games. He had, a very good game, of course, against Ottawa with 2 goals to finally get on the score sheet himself in the goals department last game. And he's had, by my eye, 3 great games, and the rest have been kind of slop. Some okay, some pretty mediocre, but on his good nights, he's a pleasure to watch, and it's just a matter of him winding it up to have more of those good nights. And he's a player. I think confidence is a big thing with that guy.
Yeah.
And when he's got it, man, he's a demon out there. He can be all over the puck, and he's got a whole lot of game, and it's just a matter of teasing more and more of it out of him. And I would say so far this season, he's been outscored when he's been on the ice, and you never like that. But I think there are lots of promising signs there, and Ken Holland's patience with that player and with that whole non-transaction of never trading the guy and eventually convincing him to come back may pay some serious dividends.
Tippett mentioned that after last game, like, they keep scoring chance stats just like we do. And he mentioned that it was good to see Puljujarvi score because he's someone who had been around the scoring chances a lot, creating his own and creating for other people, but hadn't had a lot of scoring points. And that's what we saw. We've seen too, Bruce. I mean, his chipping in on grade A scoring chances is right up there with Nugent Hopkins and Yamamoto. He's actually at a higher level in terms of making major contributions to grade A chances at even strength in terms of the rate. So he has, and finally he got rewarded. So that was good to see, and more of the same. Defense, Bruce. I also like what I'm seeing on defense. I think there's been some rough games from some of the players. Nurse and Bear started out really rough in their first games. Larson had some high-profile mistakes and continues to have a few of them now and then. Although I note last game was a really funny case in point. The last goal scored where there was a break up the ice. And Larson, what you see if you just watch the video highlight is you see Adam Larson chasing furiously to catch the Ottawa attacker. I think it was Stutzle, if I'm not mistaken, as he goes in and scores. And on online, right. I saw some people saying, "Oh, there he is again, Larson too slow to the play." And this just shows, like, you got to watch, go back from the goal. Just don't go back 3 seconds to judge the play. Go back 10, 15 seconds. And if there is an angle, try to watch the whole ice, because what you'll see in that moment is Evan Bouchard and I think it was Chris Russell getting laid off the ice, and Adam Larson trying to charge desperately to catch up from a player who's already breaking in on a breakaway. It's not Adam Larson's fault at all, that play. There's no one in the NHL who would have caught that would have cut that guy coming off the bench. Like, I don't think there is. And maybe the fastest D-man in the NHL, I don't know. Would he have caught him? I don't. It was a pretty good head start. So that was a rookie mistake by Bouchard, changing off as Ottawa was rushing off the ice, because he felt probably responsible to get off the ice, because that's what a good player does, you know. It was just a mental error by Evan Bouchard. It wasn't on Adam Larson at all. Anyway, I digress there. But I think, Bruce, I would just say that their defense overall is strong, really strong. They've got great depth. Not really strong. It's strong. And Tyson Barrie's come around too at even strength. He's playing better. Ethan Bear was playing better. So it's rounded into at least an okay group. So I've kind of gone from really strong to an okay group, but I'll stay with okay group.
They've certainly got the depth. I mean, the question is, do they have top four style defenders? And they've certainly got a lot of third pairing caliber guys.
Yes.
You know, Caleb Jones has been hit and miss in the early season. He's had a couple of really good games, and he's made a few mistakes, and he's gotten in the coach's doghouse a little bit, I think, with his you know, bad pinches are one thing. Like, you expect him to step up and go for pucks, and every once in a while, especially as a young player, you're gonna get caught out on that. Not getting in the shooting lane and getting beat for power play goals twice in 3 games. The first one probably got the coach's eye in a bad way. The second one earned him a seat in the press box. I'm pretty convinced it was that one play that probably had something to do with the change in Game 12. At the top of the roster, I mean, Darnell Nurse, he's still a flashpoint of people that like the guy, and people that just flat out don't seem to like the guy. They just, whatever he does is, well, he's on the ice with McDavid. Of course he's got good stats. Well, he does have good stats. You know, he's 4th on the team in scoring. 12 games, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points, 12 penalty minutes, plus 6. He's averaged 24 minutes and 7 seconds a game, most on the team. He hasn't played a game all year under 21 minutes. Like, they're relying on this guy every single night to carry a heavy workload
against tough competition.
He's on the PK, which, I mean, you could question how the PK is done. He filled in briefly on the power play while Tyson Barrie was getting his stuff together, and he pumped in I think 3 assists on the power play in a fairly brief amount of time on the unit. And he's, I mean, at least by statistical measures, covering the bet as clearly Oilers' number 1 defenseman. And this year he's being paid as the number 1, but that's the first time that's happened. He's been down the list up until now, and he stepped up in the absence of Oscar Klefbom. I don't think there's any question, but he's the number 1 D-man, and he's covered his part of the bargain. I'm not sure you'd say, is he in the top 15 number 1 defenseman in the league? Well, probably not, but it's not like he's a third pairing guy that they're forced to use on the first pairing. That's not even remotely close to true.
Like Mark Fane was. And that's what they did. They had a third pairing guy, Mark Fane, on their top pairing, and that's when you have your terrible team. Darnell Nurse, Bruce, I think is playing better than last year. And last year he was pretty good. Last year he was a decent top 4 defenseman in the NHL, a solid top 4 D-man in the NHL. Now he's a solid top pairing defenseman in the NHL. And what I noticed in his game is a couple things. He's more confident with the puck. He's tracking back with the puck, and he'll puck protect when he gets it. The other forward, and he'll be then really confident on that move, on that next pass. He'll make a quick cut and make a pass, and that pass is far more often than in the past is connecting with an Oilers player. So I like that confidence in the neutral zone when he's tracking back for the defensive zone. Tracking back in that first pass that he's making is better than he's done in the past. I would say in the defensive zone, he's also, other than there was that handful of first few games when he was pretty mediocre and was iffy, sketchy defensively, offensively. He just wasn't getting it done. But he seems to be doing a better job making decisions, and especially covering the defensive slot, not leaving that open. He had a tendency to wander and to overcommit. And I think he's cutting down on that kind of mistake. he's playing the veteran D-man's game, which is essentially to the Chris Russell defensive game, which is giving up a little on the outside, being a little less aggressive on the outside, but making sure you do not allow those grade A chances on the inside. And I'm especially in recent games, I'm seeing that kind of smart defensive game from Darnell Nurse. I would say Chris Russell is the least impressive to me of the Oilers defensemen right now. When he's coming to the lineup, he continues to add. He's a very strong, very strong defensive player in the NHL, and he still is that, Bruce. He's very good at shutting down the opponents in the slot. But I just think when the Oilers have Lagesson, Larson, and Russell in the lineup all at the same time, that they're missing dynamic puck moving as a group. And I don't mind two of those guys being on the roster at the same time, either Russell or Lagesson, for instance, but all three of those guys, they're all mediocre puck movers at the NHL level. Larson can sometimes enliven and have some good moments, but I just think they need to go with something else rather than those three. And the conundrum that they have now is that they have some really great puck moving defensemen, but three of them are on the right side, where Larson also plays. So, and they don't want to sit Larson, I don't think, because he's a really solid defensive defenseman. I know he's another guy, I think, who's become a lightning rod, or maybe always was a lightning rod player, Larson and Nurse. And I just think you're picking on two of your best defensemen when you're picking on those two guys, in my opinion. Like, I'm not in that camp. I don't know. Maybe there's some statistical analysis that I'm unaware of that indicates these are bad players, or I don't put it much weight on. But what I do think is they've got to figure out a way to get more passing, still more passing in the lineup. And you do that by getting your passing, attacking players in the lineup. So you got to go with Bouchard, or you got to go with Cuckoo, because they're just that much better moving the puck than these other guys.
Yeah, well, Bouchard for sure. I'm not sure I put Cuckoo quite in that category, but he's a nice sort of depth. He's been a nice depth defenseman. Yeah. Not great, not terrible. Bouchard very promising in his one game against Ottawa, but I mean you can see the offensive craftiness in Bouchard. That's largely or completely lacking on a number of other defensemen on the team. Like he's got a plan of how to actually attack from the back end, and he was involved in two other goals in his first game, one way or another, and you can see the promise there. And as you say, the trick is how do you get him in there, right? Is when you have Barrie, Bear, and Larson that are sort of your returning veterans. And right on the day the Oilers signed Tyson Barrie, the thought was, well, he's probably blocking Evan Bouchard's progress, but at least it's only a 1-year contract, and let's see where we are in a season from now. And Tyson Barrie, I mean, here's a guy to talk about. 12 games, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. That's pretty nice. -5 though, and he's got 4 of his points on the power play, and the power play is starting to come around, and Barry's starting to play a more active role. Been more involved in the offense in the last little while than at first. He was really struggling to get his bearings, it looked like to me. So what do you think of Tyson Barrie's played at this stage?
Bruce, he's been weak defensively at even strength. Like he leaks a lot of grade A chances against is what I'm seeing, but he's settling down and playing better on the attack, and a little better maybe in his own zone. So I worry against some really good teams that he's going to be exposed defensively. So this is an interesting issue, going forward about what they're going to do with him. If I had to, they have so many options now. They're going to have to make a choice, I think, on defense and waive one of these guys. But so if I'm going to challenge you to come up with your top 6. What would they be?
Right.
So I would go with. Let me see here. If you went with, let's say you go with Nurse and Bear.
Mm-hmm.
Nurse and Bear as your top pairing, because I'm not convinced that that Barrie can, against a good team, will hang in there on defense on your top pairing. I think it's more likely Bear will. So I'm going to go with Nurse and Bear. Then I'm going to go with Bouchard and Larson.
Two righties, eh?
Yeah, two righties. Moving Bouchard over probably, because he's more mobile. He's better with the puck. He reads the game better. I think he could probably make that adjustment. And then I'd go with Jones and Barrie as my third pairing. So an attacking third pairing of defensemen. Maybe Lagesson or maybe Cuckoo instead of Jones. But I think Jones is the best player of those three players. And I don't think he's been any worse than Ethan Bear. Ethan Bear's had his struggles this year too. So has Caleb Jones. They both have struggled. But I saw Jones coming on a little bit, and he's a bit under the microscope because he's, has made some mistakes. But so that's what I would do. That would be it. So I'm going to go with Nurse, Bear, Bouchard, Larson, and Jones, Barrie as my three pairings.
Yeah, well, we talked about waiving defensemen before, and mistakenly, I said that they could waive Chris Russell no problem, and there would be no problem in him clearing waivers. The problem is that they can't put him on waivers because there's still a no-move clause in the fourth year of his 4-year contract, where Peter Chiarelli gave the fourth year. Clearly, he tacked on a fourth year at a lower pay rate with a bonus and stuff that made him more tradable. But he didn't do a damn thing about the no movement clause. He has a restricted no trade clause, but they cannot put him on. They cannot send him to the minors, and that's just another, I'd have to say, outright mistake by Peter Chiarelli to not modify that contract. I mean, this is a 33-year-old defenseman now, and it was not like he was a stud number one blue liner at any time for any team. That you would need to put that kind of protection in 4 years in advance, but because of that, they don't have the option of slipping him to the taxi squad the way they can all these forwards that they've successfully waived, just because of that stupid clause that's on his contract. So anyway, I think you and I probably both agree that Chris Russell's not in the top six. If you had to pick six to go with for a specific game, that he wouldn't be the first choice. Like he's the choice when you need to stabilize things, when you need to change things up. You know what you got in Chris Russell, and he'll come in and he'll give you what he's got, and he'll help calm things down defensively and not contribute a whole lot offensively. And this is the Chris Russell we know and love for the last 5 years now as an Oiler. Top six, I'm thinking Bouchard's still on the outside looking in, but he's close. And I think you go with the three veteran righties, and I think you go with Curly Nurse is number one, and then it's coming up with do you like Jones? Cuckoo is I think the team secretly loves William Lagesson. And I think he's coming on.
I can see why.
He's coming on. Yeah, I heard Jason Strudwick talking about Lagesson the other day, and he not secretly loves William Lagesson. He was giving him the rave review for his penalty killing, and just for his positioning and his willingness and ability to join the battle and win the battles. And I think that's what they like about him. And I kind of see him as next year's Adam Larson.
Yeah.
But cheaper, younger and cheaper. But he's on the opposite side as Adam Larson. Right now they're actually playing them together. But I think there's things in common between those players. And if you can find an Adam Larson that doesn't cost you over $4 million a year to do some of those same things, then maybe that's a place where the team can realize some economy. So I think that's why they've been very reluctant to waive this player. Because I do think other teams probably have seen him. One other team out there has probably seen enough that would put in a claim. It's such a cheap player that's still on a two-way contract, but he's close. But he's so having 9 defense. I mean, it's astonishing how all of these guys are somehow getting in the lineup. In fact, the Oilers have used 26 skaters so far this year. the most in the Canadian division, and the most by a good margin compared to some of them. Calgary's only used 19, Montreal only 20. Every player on Edmonton's taxi squad, 6 of them, have all played NHL games so far this year. And the way it's worked, of course, the forwards are the ones on the taxi squad. Well, they keep 8 or even 9 defensemen on the active roster, but that's a lot of spare defensemen too. And Tippett's been working them in. And one thing I expect probably to see in the next while is as a more constant game to game lineup. But that's just a guess on my part that they'll start to sort of narrow down on who is the sort of the main team and who the subs are, and they've been working on that and trying to work that out through the first 12 games.
They listen. We agree that Russell is the weakest of the 9 defensemen that we're talking about here. I think that's probably the consensus among Oiler fans. If we're saying that, because we've always been on kind of Team Russell to some extent. So if we're saying it, that's the consensus. The question is they can't get rid of Russell though. Like, he's on the team, and I think he still can play games. He's still a useful player, especially against tough teams. So here's what I think. It's they have to decide, who do they want. Jones, Lagesson, and Cuckoo, and they've got to put one of them on waivers, I think, if you're going to protect that third goalie. Now, maybe they're not going to go that route, but
apparently they're not.
They try to, but yeah, apparently they're not. But I think at this point, Bruce, I think they can. We don't have to weigh in because they don't have to make that decision for a week or so. But I think Bouchard should play. I think he's ready for the NHL. I think he's a really good hockey player, and they could use his offense. I think this is how you win Stanley Cups, with exceptional hockey players. I think Evan Bouchard has a chance to be an exceptional NHL hockey player, and his path to the NHL should not be blocked by Slater Cuckoo and William Lagesson, or Caleb Jones even, or Ethan Barry even. Like, they need to play Evan Bouchard. I want to see them play him until he shows that he doesn't belong, because I think he's ready. So I just think they have to decide. They're going to have to decide. And if you have both, let's say it's Cuckoo that goes, and you still have Lagesson and Jones. Well, against the rugged teams, you put in Lagesson, and against other teams, you play Jones. Like, whatever you need for that game, you've got that. You've got that defenseman, or I guess under this circumstance, you could even figure out a way to play both. Like, getting Bouchard in the lineup is problematic because he'd have to play the other side. So this isn't an easy thing to just sort out. Maybe injury is going to sort this out in the next week, as often is the case. But I think for me right now, I'm leaning towards Cuckoo being the odd man out. I've liked his play a lot, but I still think Jones is a better overall. He's got a higher ceiling. And I've seen enough of William Lagesson now to be really comfortable with him as taking Chris Russell's spot as your designated, defensive defenseman on the team. So, but overall, Bruce, they're in a good position. It's kind of tricky for them to handle it, but it's almost, and but as you say, Bruce, the one question you had was do they have a top 4? Do they have a really solid top 4? Evan Bouchard is maybe not the answer this year, but soon for your top 4. He and Broberry are your best bets. So Bouchard's here. He looked great in that first game. Keep playing him. Let's keep playing him, see what we got.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue. He should be in there somewhere. I'm reluctant to use righty-righty pairings because I don't think any of the righties has played the left side or any experience playing the left side. And it's just one of the laws of hockey. There's more lefties than righties. And on the back end, or you only have the two choices, right or left, there's no center, almost every left-hand defenseman worth his salt that's been a good player coming up through this minor hockey and minor leagues and so on, they've all had teams that have more lefties than righties, and they've all said, well, you're our best defenseman. You move over and play the right side. And they've all got it sort of somewhere in their background. They play on their offside. Whereas righties are gold, and a coach gets a good righty and he sticks them on right defense. And the only reason to move him over if he actually has a surplus of more righties than lefties. And you just don't see it very often. I think the last time I can remember the Oilers running for any length of time 2 righties on the same pairing was Steve Staios and Jason Smith. in '06 when they put Chris Pronger and Yaroslav Spacek together for a while on the first pairing, and then they had a shutdown pairing of Smith and Stayoffs, and then they had Matt Green on the third pairing. They actually had three right shot defensemen. Well, racking my brain, I can't remember a time they had four
Yeah, but
righties
it's
that
not
could
because it's
play.
necessarily a terrible idea. It's just because right shot players are less common,
Hmm.
and it's funny because look at how many of the lefties can hang in there on right D. There's Cuckoo,
Well, hmm,
Jones, Russell,
yep,
um, and Lagesson have all played on
hmm,
the right
yep.
side. So you're right. It is much more common to get that experience. Could Bear or Bouchard do it? And do you get a net gain if you do that? Well, if Evan Bouchard steps up, I think you do. So I just, I'm okay with the 7D for now, though. I think with this team, maybe that's the answer, like going forward. Like, not saying it isn't, and you spot the other guys in and out depending on what you need. So we'll see. It's unusual to go with seven defensemen, but we're seeing it more in this year's NHL. It's much more common this year than it's ever been in the past with a lot of teams. So maybe that's the way you go.
Tampa did a lot in the playoffs, and they won the Stanley Cup.
Well,
So
there you go.
there's always imitators of what works. Yesterday, apparently in practice, uh, Tippett did go a little bit with Bear and Bouchard as a pairing, with Bouchard on the left side, and that may be an indicator that he'll go with seven defensemen in the next game, but with four righties, as opposed to last game where Bear was out, and so they only had the three righties and they all played pretty much a regular shift. Well, if they go with seven and they cycle a little bit, they're going to have to use two righties together at some point. And Bear and Bouchard were getting that trial. And like I say, Bouchard, with his one game of NHL this year and 8 games in his career experience, he was the guy being asked to make the switch. But maybe he's the guy that's just most suited to it because of his skill set.
Yeah, I think it's like they know. I think they have a good sense of what Lagesson can do now, or a better sense. They have a good sense of what Cuckoo can do. So they just need to and they have a sense of what Caleb Jones can do. They just need to know what Bouchard can do, and then they can make a decision. Maybe he's not ready, and then you send him to the HL for the rest of the year. But I think they need to, in the next couple of weeks, decide that, and then make it and go from there. The final category, Bruce, we've already dealt with a little bit, is goalie. Koskinen has been pretty much their only goalie, and he has been okay-ish. He hasn't let in too many of the absolute stinker goals, those backbreakers, but he hasn't come up with enough big saves, although he did on Mitch Marner. So his overall save percentage is down from, I think, 917 to 897, something like
Yeah.
that. Is that what we're so? And I think so. That's indicative of a goalie who it could be a goalie who's really sucking, or it could be a goalie who's getting a lot of tough shots and isn't saving enough of them. And that's what I would say with Koskinen, that he's been pretty good, but too many nights he's been the second best goalie on the ice. And that may speak to the level of talent among the goalies in the Canadian division. I always call it the Canadian division, not the
Yep.
North Division, because that's what it is.
The
And
Scotia North Division.
I guess anyway, they got to make their money somehow. Uh, so yeah, he's been. So I just like to see him be the best goalie on the ice at least half the time. And I think if he's the best goalie on the ice half the time, the Oilers will win. 6 out of 10, 6 out of 10 games.
I think the difference in the save percentage, if you dug down, would be mostly on the penalty kill. Where last year, both he and Mike Smith were over 900 on the year, and clearly nowhere close to that with the penalty kill clearance rate that as poor as it's been this year.
Yeah.
Koskinen, not saying I'm blaming him on those power play goals against, but last year their numbers were exceptional in that department. The goalies were. They were both in the top 6 in the NHL, and this year not so much. The question now is Mike Smith. Obviously he's ready in the sense that they put the third goalie on waivers today in order to make room for Mike Smith to come on board. But how ready is he at age 38? coming off an injury now, and having played sort of 26 serious minutes of hockey in the last year. He's got to um, he's got to find that level and find it pretty fast of being at least a competent number two.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we do know a few things about Mike Smith. We know he's a competitive son of a gun, and that he'll not even think of himself as a number two, but as a guy battling for number one. And I see value in Mike Smith as a guy who can help organize the defense a little bit. He's more of a take charge guy back there, and the team seems to respond to the guy. I mean, we had some stats last year that were a little eye popping of how better the team played in front of him, and some might write that off to just he was lucky, but I think part of that has to go to the netminder's approach to the game and his leadership role that he's clearly taken on the team. I think they've missed him, frankly. And I mean, at least having that second guy that they could have thrown in there for even 3 games out of the 12, I think they would have been better served by that. And now we're going to find out, because he's probably going to play at least 3 games in the next 12, and we'll see if he's ready. But that's a key. If he can come in at on top of his game, wherever it is at age 38, I think will make the Oilers. It'll change him, and hopefully change them for the better. I do understand that in preparation for the Calgary game, that he was doing extra work on the speed bag yesterday, so he should be good to go.
Bruce, he's a hot and cold goalie, and he's been increasingly hot and cold the last few years, and I think it's probably based on age and injury. Like, I think he's gone through spells where he's been nicked up, and he's had subpar months at a time. He survived like 6 weeks of just atrocious play last year, which would have driven many goalies out of the NHL at his age. But, they've got a sweet tooth for Mike Smith. Dave Tippett does. He's like the Josh Archibald of goalies. Tippett, all the coaches fall in love with certain players, right? And I think we can see this with Tippett, with Archibald, who's and with Smith. So, if he's the Mike Smith, if he's healthy, he can be a good goalie. We've seen that. And, hopefully he's healthy and good to go, because they could really use him. The thing that pops into my head with Mike Smith is the bad, ugly goal against. Maybe it's because my last big impression of him is the first game of the playoffs against Chicago, where
that first goal.
Oh God!
Hide your eyes, man.
So Mike Smith can let in some really stinker goals, and I don't think he's as good a goalie as Koskinen, but he can be, for stretches of time, as good as Koskinen. So we'll see. This was always a risky signing. I think it wasn't one that most fans were in love with at the time. Might have been the best option, maybe not. So I'm not thrilled with the Oilers goaltending, but it should be good enough to get them into the playoffs at this point, is my final assessment. Any final thoughts, Bruce?
Only that everything that we're looking at, scoring chances, goals against average, save percentage, is a product in part of the Oilers playing in the highest scoring division in the NHL, and only playing games within that division. We don't have any interlocking play to sort of balance things out around the league. I did a post yesterday, and I just looked at the results of each of the 4 divisions through the first 3+ weeks of the season. Still a fairly small sample, but the Canadian North Division, Scotia North Division, has produced over 1 goal per game more than the 3 American divisions have on average, at least in regulation time. Comparing apples to apples, 19% higher goals scored in the Canadian division than stateside, and so that that's going to impact your team defense to some extent. There's no real good shutdown teams in Canada, but there sure is a lot of offensive talent, and we've got a lot of exciting hockey to look forward to, I think.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier about Ottawa. We have 2 games coming up against Ottawa back to back, I believe. The Oilers kind of they got it done. They got the 2 points, and you kind of you hope and expect that. But Montreal last night lost to Ottawa, and Montreal I saw outshot them badly. So I'm guessing maybe that they probably had more scoring chances. But you can lose. Like Ottawa's going to steal some points. Let's just hope that it's not generally speaking against the Edmonton Oilers. I was hoping that the Oilers would win 3 out of 4 games against Ottawa. So they're well on their way to doing that, but they still have to accomplish that. And 4 out of 4 would be even better, obviously. But tonight's game against Calgary is going to be fascinating because tomorrow night's game against Calgary, because we haven't seen these 2 teams and how they match up this year. And the Oilers really matched up poorly against the Montreal Canadiens. And I fear that we might see something a little similar dynamic against the Calgary Flames. Or maybe not. We'll see. So that story is yet to be told.
Yeah, they basically they swept Ottawa, got swept by Montreal, and every other team has been all splits. And Calgary's in that mushy middle too, where I think the expected outcome of any 2 games against Calgary would be 1-1. But sure would be nice to get that first one in Cowtown tomorrow. And just to prove anything's possible, Ottawa beat Montreal, first place Montreal, last night in Montreal, just to end their dismal losing streak. So, in any given game, you get the bounces. Anything can happen, and Ottawa winning in Montreal, I think, proves that. So it's nice that they broke out of their slump in the one game they weren't playing the Oilers. So,
yeah. So the NHL teams are so close, right? They're so close. Now the difference is Ottawa is about a goal worse every game, at least a goal worse. So they're favored to lose every game. But the other teams are like 0.01 or 0.02 or 0.03 goals apart from each other, right? Like that's the difference. And even the Montreal Canadiens are a better team, but they're not that much better than they're right now a better team. We'll see where they are at the end of the year, but they're not that much better than the other teams. They're just like, any of the other teams could easily beat them on a given night if they get the bounces, and depending on goaltending, and these are huge factors every single game. So yeah, the Oilers and the Flames are probably like, it's, what do they call, the bettors call them pick 'em. Like it's almost like, who knows? It's a coin flip. So we'll find out. Alrighty. Thanks for talking today, Bruce, this morning, I should say.
Yeah, nice to sort of take a step back. We've been doing game by game by game by game, of course, every other day a podcast. And this is the first sort of time we've had in the whole season to take a breathe and take a step back and sort of look at the overall situation. So nice to chat about that. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.